Hello, Earth neighbors. Welcome to the Crimisphere, a space to discuss crime and criminal behavior. The way I like to imagine the Crimisphere is that we are like neighbors, Earth neighbors, having an ordinary day until something happens. The police arrived, and the neighbors are gathered around the crime scene tape at the edge of property lines, trying to figure out what happened. Who knows something? Stay tuned until the end to learn what we know so far. Hello, Earth neighbors. How's everyone? Today's video, I thought I would discuss a case that disturbs me on many levels. And I think the main level is because the victims in this case died doing something that I spent several years doing myself, which is just attending a concert. So this is the story of how two individuals lost their lives after attending a Drake concert. You know, the musical artist Drake. And I want to dig into how I believe the information that I was able to find in public records, I believe it's going to have a tremendous impact on, the outcome of this trial. I assume it's going to go to trial, but this is one of those cases that we don't have closure. We just have a story. And, of course, you have traumatized family members and you have two people who lost their lives tragically. But I want to dig into and share what I found about the defendant in this case. And let's talk about whether or not we think that this is going to play a big or small role in how a jury, or a judge, in how they would determine punishment, potentially in a case like this. Let's start by looking at, I think, one of the most impactful things about this story, and it's probably one of the reasons why I wanted to cover it, which is the impact of when we can see a crime occur versus hearing about it. I want to explore that idea. I want to talk about it more and see what everybody thinks about its impact on sentencing, its impact on potential jurors. How does it affect outcomes? So this one was captured on a traffic camera, which is a whole nother story we'll get into later about how this image became public. But it is a 3-second loop. And I had to loop it because what you're going to see happens so fast that I had to let it loop a couple of times just to really kind of like see details and see, the objects that are moving, or, it's mind blowing. It almost seems like something that is from a horror movie, but it's real. And two people lost their lives. So let's take a look.
Prosecutors say Henderson was going at least 70 miles per hour when he raced through a red light. Family members of the victim, Laticha Bracero, and her daughter, Alyssa Cordova, say the video is difficult to watch. In court Tuesday, prosecutors read a statement on behalf of those family members, and they asked for justice and said Henderson used his vehicle that night as a weapon. Meanwhile, the attorney for the suspect, Scott Rosenblum, is also upset. He believes the video's release could be an issue with jury selection.
Not thrilled that the tape was released. I'd like to get to the bottom of that. I don't understand why and how it got released into the general public this time. I mean, obviously the family wasn't happy with it. It apparently went viral. I don't know, but it has an effect on everybody.
Initially, a judge released Henderson on a $20,000 cash bond, but he didn't have any restrictions. Now, after Tuesday's court appearance, he must wear a GPS monitor, surrender his license, and can only leave his house for medical or court appointments. Police say they are doing an internal investigation right now to see how this video was leaked. As far as the two women, we're told they're being laid to rest this Sunday in Chicago. Reporting live, Justina Cornell, 5 on your side.
Let's begin by taking a look at the complaint that was filed against the 22-year-old driver. So it reads, the circuit attorney of the city of St. Louis, state of Missouri, upon information and belief, charges that count 1, involuntary manslaughter in the first degree. That's a Class C felony. On February 14th, 2014, the place is Olive at North 18th Street. The defendant, in violation of Section 565.024, committed the Class C felony of involuntary manslaughter in the first degree, punishable upon conviction under Sections 558.002 and 558.011, in that on or about February 14, 2024, in the city of St. Louis, state of Missouri, the defendant recklessly caused the death of victim 1 by striking her with a motor vehicle operated by the defendant while failing to keep a proper lookout, operating a motor vehicle at a speed that was greater than reasonable under the conditions, and failing to obey a traffic control signal. Count 2, armed criminal action, Class U felony. On February 14th, 2024, the place is the same. The defendant, in violation of Section 571.015, committed the felony of armed criminal action punishable upon conviction under Section 571.015.1. In that on or about February 14th, 2024, in the city of St. Louis, state of Missouri, the defendant committed the felony of involuntary manslaughter in the first degree, charged in count 1, all allegations of which are incorporated herein by reference. And the defendant committed the foregoing felony by, with, and through the knowing use, assistance, and aid of a motor vehicle, a dangerous instrument. So just to not be redundant, let's just say that the same charges were filed for both victims. So that's how we get to 4 counts. So you got 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter in the first degree and 2 counts of armed criminal action. So that's what the original complaint said. Let's go ahead and also look at how involuntary manslaughter is defined, because I think some people always wonder why this isn't like first degree murder. They have kind of an emotional response to the event, and definitely that graphic video where we see this happen to those people, of course, it will evoke an emotional response where you just I want the highest charge. This was completely senseless. It was a horrible thing to witness and to see. However, when you really look at how involuntary manslaughter is defined, this is the appropriate charge. So it reads, involuntary manslaughter is a person commits the offense of involuntary manslaughter in the first degree if he or she recklessly causes the death of another person. So when I think about murder, I think about somebody that did something intentionally. They sought to kill somebody, or it was an intention behind the murder. This was something where someone did something that was so careless, so reckless, that it caused the death of another person. And I always think about this in the context of how we, as Earth neighbors, how people land in this situation in the first place. And one of those things is not thinking about that gray line between an accident and criminal charges. It's something that everybody, especially young people, need to consider and be fully educated on. This will probably start in high school, where you understand that playing with your radio, messing with your cell phone while you're driving, drinking and driving, being under the influence of drugs and driving. That all has moved you from an accident potentially to the zone of criminal behavior or criminal recklessness. And that could be a difference maker between your insurance just paying out a claim of an accident, a true accident, and you going to jail or prison. People should know this before you get a driver's license. It should happen. So I personally was not educated in this. It was not drilled into me. And that's where I feel like we kind of fail people in society when they don't have the proper context. Now, mind you, some people are still going to make poor decisions. I'm not making any excuses for the defendant here. But I also think that it would behoove us as a society to make clear when we're teaching driver's education and when we're putting a driver's license in the hands of a young person, that they understand the difference, that they understand that these things could cause you to go to prison one day. Let's move on to the next one. Let's move on to the other charge, which is armed criminal action. And this is defined as any person who commits any felony under the laws of this state by which or through the use, assistance, or aid of a dangerous instrument or deadly weapons is also guilty of the offense of armed criminal action, and upon conviction shall be punished by imprisonment by the Department of Corrections for a term of not less than 3 years and not to exceed 15 years, unless the person is unlawfully possessing a firearm, in which case the term of imprisonment shall be for a term of not less than 5 years. The punishment imposed pursuant to this subsection shall be in addition to and consecutive to any punishment provided by law for the crime committed by, with, or through the use, assistance, or aid of a dangerous instrument or deadly weapon. No person convicted under this subsection shall be eligible for parole, probation, conditional release, or suspended imposition or execution of sentence for a period of 3 calendar years. Now moving on to the probable cause statement. That has a little bit more details, and at this point we see that the charges are still the 4 counts, and it says on February 14th, 2024, police responded to the intersection of Olive Street and North 18th Street in downtown St. Louis after a report of a vehicle collision. The incident was recorded on surveillance video. In the video, a Jeep Grand Cherokee is depicted entering the intersection, violating a red traffic signal and striking pedestrians victim 2 and victim 1. Both pedestrians were later pronounced deceased as a result of the injuries they suffered in the collision. The defendant was observed by police officers arriving on scene in the driver's seat of the Jeep Grand Cherokee. In addition, in a statement to police, the defendant made admissions indicating that he was driving the vehicle at the time of the collision. Data retrieved from the Jeep Grand Cherokee indicated that the vehicle was traveling at speeds in excess of 70 miles per hour prior to violating the red traffic signal. Based on the foregoing and the serious nature of the charges, I believe that the defendant is not likely to appear voluntarily on a summons and is a danger to the community. And this is by a police officer, Matthew Wickvoort. With Zorick. I don't know how to say that last name. Anyway, so one of the things that I wanted to speak on also was, I thought it was interesting, and I don't know if this is normal. Maybe it is. Somebody can comment and tell me in the Comments Café is it normal for them to say, for a police officer or whoever files the probable cause statement, for them to go so far as to say that, we think is it always, because I saw this in the previous case I did, which is that they were saying that he's a danger to the community. In that case, I agreed because there was a gun involved in some fashion. But in this one, I kind of felt like, all you have to do is revoke his license, tell him he can't drive. Well, what danger is he after that? Because it didn't seem like it was something intentional. So I don't really understand like why this particular aspect comes along with charges for involuntary manslaughter. You know what I mean? I think, well, I'll answer my own question later in the video because I do have more information to share. So anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting, though. It kind of stood out to me when I read the probable cause statement. I believe that the defendant is not likely to appear. Why? Based on what? Like, I thought that was interesting too, but I don't know. We'll dig into some more information and maybe the answer will come up in that information. Okay, so it was later that in addition to the 4 counts that we just discussed, that DWI was added. So a 5th count was added, which is driving while intoxicated. And that's defined as it is a single offense in Missouri, but it results in both an administrative and criminal case. If arrested for a DWI offense in Missouri, you will face an administrative process through which the Department of Revenue will suspend your license. So that leads us right into the bond that was set and what the parameters were. And there was some controversy around this particular case because the news reported, media reports said that his original bond was set and there were no restrictions. And that upset, naturally, the victim's family, that there were no restrictions on his bond. Later, there were restrictions implemented, and I believe they included, I'll get into the bond part. Let's just dig into that part too. So it looks like his bond, it lists all of the charges. You can see all 5 counts on there. That the driving while intoxicated was added, which is a misdemeanor B offense. And just at the bottom, it says, and this is from March 19, 2024. So we see that's, about a month later, a little bit over, after this collision happened, that the bond amount was set at $200,000 with 10% cash. And from my understanding that he was able to put down the $20,000, I believe it was, and was released with GPS monitoring. So basically house arrest, and can only leave the house for doctor's appointments, court or attorney visits. And it says no contact with victim's family. These are all issues that I wanted to talk about, which is when you're accused, and mind you, the victims will, I'll talk more about the victims and how I don't really include them in this part of my thinking, because I think that they deserve separate considerations and, let's say give them some leeway on certain technical aspects of our justice system. It's just never going to be a satisfying thing for a victim's family. So that's why I'm kind of dealing with it separately. But when I looked at this, it made me reflect on this aspect of our system, which is you've been accused of something. You haven't been proven guilty of something, and now you can't work. How are you going to have adequate attorney or legal representation if you can't work to pay an attorney? And I know they say one will be provided for you if you can't afford one, but everybody knows that your outcome is going to be worse. You're going to probably end up in prison with a higher sentence if you don't hire a good attorney, a paid attorney. So this aspect of the system, I think personally, is a little bit of, like a trap, in my opinion. Because yes, of course you want to be out, so thank God you get bond, right? If you're accused of a crime. And mind you, he admitted to some of this, but let's just say that you are a person who is innocent and you're accused of something in this country. it makes me think about this aspect of saying, I can't work. I'm being punished before I get punished. So before I've been found guilty of a crime, you know what I mean? So that aspect of it, I think, is questionable in my opinion. And I know some people feel like they should not even see the light of day with bond in a situation like this. But that's the reason why we don't have vigilante justice. We don't have, people getting their tiki torches together and, gathering a mob to do it KKK style and go and, seek justice like they did, in America's early history, right? Not that long ago. So I just found it interesting because it made me think about this aspect and how it affects people who are economically disadvantaged. And, how it has been statistically shown that certain economic groups see prison far more often than people who have the means and the money and, to get better representation and to pay their way out of punishment, basically. So that's the reason why I wanted to talk about this case and this aspect of it, because I was just like, chime in the comments if you agree or disagree about that, which is, it seems like it's kind of like entrapping you in a way. So no contact, and I wanted to talk about this too, which is no contact with the victim's family, of course. And I understand that. However, one of the things that I often see, I should say, is that victims will be like, oh, he showed no remorse. Oh, he didn't even apologize. These things often come up in impact statements and things like that. But the truth is that the system itself, the legal system, makes it so that anything you say will be used against you in court. So if you assume responsibility for something that you like, I'm not sure that it was my fault, or I need this investigated too so that we can determine faults, right? If you say sorry, it will make you look guilty. It will make you appear like you done something wrong when the evidence could show something different later. That there could have been multiple faults in a situation. Now, mind you, that's not necessarily the case here. We all saw the video. However, it just made me think about these things and these aspects of our system that a lot of times in the comments, and you hear just, amongst neighbors, right? When we talk about these cases, we don't really stop to take the emotions out of it and think about how the legal system is set up for certain things to go down in a structured way because of the system, And that's one of them when I think about no contact with the family. You can't say anything to them because at one point I'm going to show you, let's just roll that. And I'll show you why this really made me reflect on it, because it kind of paints a picture in the public court, the court of public opinion, where people start to think that you're like this cold-blooded killer. You don't care about other people. It just gives you something when you can't speak, when you can't defend yourself in public. And it's not in your best interest to speak or defend yourself without a lawyer. Not in this system, for sure. So having a good heart or being truly sympathetic or sorry for what you've done or assuming, hey, I did that does not benefit you here, which I think is a whole rigged system all by itself, where you're basically incentivizing people to lie. And it's part of the thing that angers victims' families too, which is that, why are you lying when you know you did it? Why are you lying when there's a video of you doing it? All these types of things that I always found frustrating. And I think it costs us millions of dollars in when you think about what attorneys and judges and lawyers and courts, all of those things, when they spend weeks and weeks and days, talking about these aspects of a court case. It's a waste of money and time that's the way the system is set up. Just my soapbox about that, because some things we already have the evidence for. So I almost feel like, why do we waste so much money and time on things that we already know is true, or we already have evidence of the facts? So I think it's kind of a waste of time, even though I do believe in due process, but I'm just saying there's a lot of waste, in the process, built in the process.
The 22-year-old charged with hitting and killing a Chicago mother and daughter as they crossed the street faces a new charge tonight. In a crowded courtroom filled with his family members, Monte Henderson faced a St. Louis judge with the victim's loved one seated feet away. Investigator Mitch McCoy has more on what happened.
Hi there, good to be with you. The grand jury added a misdemeanor driving while intoxicated charge against Monte Henderson. He's already facing involuntary manslaughter and armed criminal action. For the victim's family, the courtroom was the first stop to an even bigger challenge.
We have trust in you, God.
If only the power of prayer
In Jesus' name we pray.
could bring back the people whose pictures now fill a poster. The family of 42-year-old Laticha Bracero and 21-year-old Alyssa Cordova hold back tears, where one story ends, but a new mission begins.
We're not going to stop demanding justice.
Earlier in the day, Monte Henderson faced a judge for a preliminary hearing, pleading not guilty to involuntary manslaughter, armed criminal action, and now DWI. Laticha and Alyssa's family drove from Chicago to be in court Friday and saw Henderson in person for the first time.
My family keeps being devastated, you know? Seeing him was, obviously we anticipated it, but it hurts still.
The Chicago mother-daughter duo were crossing the street after a concert on Valentine's Day when an out-of-control SUV slammed into them at 18th and Olive. Investigators say real-time crime center cameras caught Henderson's SUV blowing red lights and speeding around Compton before the horrific crash.
We're so angry how somebody could sit up there and plead not guilty knowing that he took them from us.
Video of the crash had been leaked online. It appears to have come from a real-time crime center camera. We have seen the video and are not airing it because it's too graphic to show on TV. Police officials say that there's an internal investigation into the leak.
That's something that you never want to see. And when I was forwarded the video, I had already anticipated that it was going to be a hard image to see. But I literally had no words. It was horrible. You can't unsee it.
The 22-year-old suspect appeared in court with support by his side, hugging loved ones before going back home, where he's been ordered to house arrest.
He sleeps in his bed. He eats at his table. He gets to hug his family. What do we got? We're just broken. We're broken.
Henderson has no criminal record. Court records reveal, though, that Henderson did receive multiple speeding tickets in the last few years. He'll be back in court on April 23rd. For the Fox Files, I'm investigator Mitch McCoy.
Okay, and again, as I said before, I'm going to discuss my thoughts on, the victim's perspective in these types of tragedies. But for now, I'm focused on the criminal aspect and the defendant in this case. And when I look at this young man, I don't see a criminal. Some people do. I saw articles, and I will post some of those where they're calling him a killer and, using very inflammatory word choices on purpose, obviously, because it is a horrific video. It is a horrific crime, and it's an injustice. I don't deny any of that. I completely agree. If that were me or my family, I would be just as upset as the Bracero and Cordova family. But for the time being, I just wanted to just reflect on a certain aspect of this, which is this is a person that doesn't have a criminal background at all. And it made me really reflect and think about, is this the most productive route to send a 22-year-old down? Sending them to prison, giving them the societal scarlet letter of being a convicted felon, if he is convicted in this case, and then having to manage the societal ongoing punishment, I think that's the word, of once you have that scarlet letter attached to you of being a felon, you become the worst in the minds of others. Even if it was something like this, where it's an involuntary manslaughter, you're still a felon, right? The name is the same, no matter if you intentionally kill your pregnant girlfriend, or a child, or if you were reckless in a vehicle and caused a severe accident, which is what this is. Now, they, spoke about right at the end of that report about his previous traffic, citations. And that is something that is the bomb to be dropped on this case, in my opinion, that I alluded to in the beginning, which is his past tickets, the excessive speeding, which we're going to get into. I believe is going to, if it's allowed in court, I don't know if it's too, if it will prejudice the jury too much that a judge may not allow it. I don't know how those decisions are made, but I am fascinated by how it could impact the case though, because does it shift things in my mind if I were a juror? If you tell me that this person has been warned, has gotten tickets, excessive amount of tickets for speeding in a short amount of time, does it impact how I feel about this accident or this collision, right? And I think it would. It would change my opinion. It would shift to, hey, boy, you got warnings before this, right? Young man, right? You got warnings before this. You knew that this was dangerous. You knew that this was could potentially hurt yourself or others. But then I think about what does it mean to be 22? What does it mean to be a young boy, a young man? Because 22 is still young. And in the law, of course, you are an adult in the law at 17 in America. But we already have, I've sat in biology classes, I've sat in psychology classes, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that they have already pointed out that the brain of males, along with their bodies, continue to develop until they're like 25, right? And no, that doesn't mean that we will absolve them of crimes. We know that they have the ability to make good and bad, good or poor decisions, So of course they have to be held accountable and responsible. But it did make me think about the job of a jury, the job of a judge in a case like this, of trying to find that balance between what is enough punishment that this person understands and has to pay some type of, like, let me inconvenience you, let me hurt you in some kind of way for the hurt that you have caused to society, to those families that have been impacted by this. There's something has to be done. But I also am thinking about what is the best way to use a person who doesn't have a criminal record. Is it best to send them into the same type of prison that holds people who do intentional murder, people who are rapists, people who are pedophiles, people who do, what I would consider more heinous crimes? Okay. Now, mind you, I'm not trying to say that this isn't a horrible crime, but I also am not going to sugarcoat it and say that this is the same as intentional murder. It's not. Not to me, it's not. And look, we can argue about it in the comments, but I don't see them as being the same. And I don't know that prison is necessarily the best way to use this. Because, like, for instance, let's just say that we do have prison, but we also make him do some kind of community service. Could that be serving? Could his life be used better? That's what I'm challenging. Could we put him in place to be of better service and use in the Crimisphere, in this environment, right? Or I shouldn't even call it Crimisphere at that point, because I really am thinking about it in the sense of, could we use this person and rehabilitate him, make him understand? Because some things is going to come with maturity. In 2 or 3 years, he will probably be thinking about how dumb it was to do this in the first place. How this series of choices, choosing to drink, choosing to drive and not take an Uber or a Lyft, that's what landed him here. But I just think about it in the sense of society, and should he wear that type of label of being a felon forever, and the path that it leads people down, is that the best for this type of situation? I don't know. But I'm just saying that it's worthy of thought and consideration in my mind. For those of us who are interested in outcomes and fair application of law and justice. I just wanted to take a look at something for your consideration, which is what happens when the opposite community, when these things happen. And it's for consideration for those, because I've noticed a trend, of how things play out in the court of public opinion, which is that the working class, those at the bottom, they are, harsh with each other on lock them up, throw away the key, that type of sentiment around these types of crimes and issues. However, those at the top, they, shall I say, are more forgiving. They don't see each other wanting to put each other in prison as much. They want to see the best lawyers. They want to see, let me make you an offer you can't refuse, which is restitution, which is to throw money at the problem. And how it successfully allows them to do less time, have less economic impact from bad decisions, okay? I'm going to give you a few, let's say, case studies to consider. And you tell me what you think after looking over these. So let's take a look at Matthew Broderick, the actor. Famously known for, in my timeline, of life on this earth, he was a huge actor. And one of the big movies that I'll never forget is Ferris Bueller's Day Off. But let's just take a look at his brush with the law. And in 1987, probably feels like, forever ago, on August the 5th, 1987, while driving a rented car outside of Tempo, Northern Ireland, Broderick crossed into the wrong lane and collided head-on with another car. The driver, Anna Gallagher, 28, and her mother, Margaret Doherty, 63, were both killed instantly. He was vacationing with Jennifer Grey, whom she's also an actress, whom he had begun dating during the filming of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. He suffered a fractured leg and ribs, a concussion, and a collapsed lung. Gray's injuries included severe whiplash, which later required surgery to avoid paralysis. Broderick told police he had no recollection of the crash and did not know why he had been in the wrong lane. What I first remember is waking up in the hospital with a very strange feeling going on in my leg. He was charged with causing death by dangerous driving and faced up to 5 years in prison, but was convicted of the lesser charge of careless driving and fined. In US dollars, it amounted to $175. The victim's family called the verdict a travesty of justice. The victim's brother or son, Martin Doherty, later forgave Broderick amid plans to meet him in 2003. In February 2012, when Broderick was featured in a multi-million-dollar Honda commercial that aired during the Super Bowl, Doherty said the meeting has still not taken place and that Broderick wasn't the greatest choice of drivers, knowing his past. So a little bit of shade right there. Okay, but I'm not done yet. Let's take a look at another. And next, let's look at Amy Locane. I think that's how her last name is pronounced, Locane. On June 27th of 2010 at 9:05 p.m., Locane was involved in a fatal motor vehicle collision in Montgomery, New Jersey. Locane was driving 53 miles per hour in a 35 mile per hour zone and rapidly closed on the car driven by Fred Seaman, which was traveling at 3 miles per hour as it made a left-hand turn in front of her to enter his driveway. The crash killed Seaman's wife, 60-year-old Helen Seaman. Following the crash, testing revealed Locane's blood alcohol level was 0.23%. nearly 3 times the limit for legal impairment. In December of 2010, Locane was indicted for aggravated manslaughter and assault by automobile. On November 27th of 2012, a Somerset County jury convicted Locane of vehicular homicide and assault by auto. On February 14th of 2013, she was sentenced to 3 years in prison for the crime, with Montgomery Superior Court Judge Robert B. Reed imposing less than the minimum 5-year sentence due to mitigating factors that included consideration of her children's welfare. Locane served her sentence at Edna Mahane Correctional Facility for Women and was released on parole June 12, 2015. Late in 2015, following Locane's release from prison, her husband filed for divorce and for custody of their 2 daughters. On July 22nd of 2016, so the next year, a New Jersey appeals court ruled that the 3-year sentencing would be reviewed due to what the court felt was an inadequate explanation by Reed, that former judge, for leniency. Upon review, Reed stated in September of 2016 that he had erred in his decision and that she should serve an additional 6 months. So he's still trying to say that she should get less than the minimum 5-year sentence. Okay. On January 13th of 2017, however, Reed ruled Locane would not have to go back to prison, saying her conduct since her release indicated she was not a threat to society. Speaking later about the crash and victims, Locane said that the memory of Helen Seaman will be forever in her thoughts. In February of 2019, Locane was resentenced to 5 years behind bars, but remained free on bail pending an appeal. On July 22nd of 2020, an appeals court ruled that a different judge incorrectly resentenced Locane in 2019 and sent the case back for another sentencing. The ruling issued also rejected Locane's argument that sentencing her again violates double jeopardy protections since she had already completed her sentence and parole term. James Ronco, Locane's attorney, said that he would appeal to the state Supreme Court, a process that could take several months to play out. So you see how they're dragging this out. I mean, look at all this about her getting a lesser sentence. She killed somebody. Okay. And finally, we have in here on September 17th of 2020, Locane was sentenced to 8 years in New Jersey State Prison after a judge agreed with prosecutors that Locane's initial sentence was too lenient. New Jersey state law requires Locane to serve more than 6 years before being eligible for parole. She is currently incarcerated at Edna Mahane Correctional Facility for Women at the time of this Wikipedia page, okay? And finally, my third case study is looking at rocker, former Motley Crue member of, his name is Vincent Neil Wharton, better known as Vince Neil, okay? In late 1984, Finnish hard rock band Hanoi Rocks was on their second American tour and their first to reach California. The 2 gigs meant to be held in Los Angeles sold out in only 20 minutes. On the day they arrived in Los Angeles, December 8th, Hanoi Rocks drummer Nicholas Razzle Dingley and the other members of the band, with the exception of the singer Michael Monroe, who were recovering from a fractured ankle, visited Neil's home and spent the day in Redondo Beach. After partying for hours, Neil and Razzle decided to visit a local liquor store in Neil's Di Tommaso Pantera. Neil, who was drunk, lost control of the car and hit an oncoming vehicle. The 2 occupants of the other car were seriously injured and suffered brain damage. And Dingley, who was a passenger in the car with Neil, was killed. Neil was charged with vehicular manslaughter and driving under the influence of alcohol in connection with the crash. His blood alcohol content was 0.17, well above the California legal limit at the time, which was 0.10. In September of 1985, the next year, Los Angeles County Superior Court Judge Edward Hintz Jr. sentenced Neal to 30 days in jail and 5 years probation. Neal was ordered to pay $2.6 million in restitution to the victims of the crash and undertake 200 hours of community service. Neal was paroled after serving 15 days in jail for good behavior. Motley Crue dedicated their third studio album, Theater of Pain, to Razzle, which was the band member Nicholas Dingley, who was killed in that crash. So I say all this to say, do you see how different the application of the law is when you have money? Like, for instance, this one woman, Amy Locane, she was, and mind you, I think that sometimes there's a race factor, in the application of the law, which I think is all three of these have that benefit. And then I think that there's sometimes sexism, which I think is the reason why Amy got off on saying, oh, her poor kids. I don't think too many men could get off on that with that kind of reasoning. I would doubt. And then you have the economic factor, which is when you have money, when you have influence and that kind of power or celebrity status, people don't see you as a criminal. You're not the killer in the article. You just made an accident. You had an accident. You had a mistake. It's just not, characterized the same in the public. It's not characterized the same in articles. It's not punished the same in the legal system. So I say all that just as a reminder to those of us who are, earth neighbors. We're down here in the Crimisphere together. Don't be so hard on each other. I mean, in a system that I have plenty of issues with, from its foundation, I have issues with it. You know what I mean? Because I'm not, let's say, naturally a person who believes in this catch and release system that we have where nobody's accountable. Like, if I were queen, if this were my country, okay, it would be a life for life. That's the way I would have it. And the reason why I would feel very clear-minded about having such a harsh or such an exact type of crime and punishment is because I wouldn't set you up for failure. That's the reason I'm making these videos, is for you to think about how the system, the society that we've built collectively, how it sets you up for failure, how it sets you up to basically be the food that feeds a criminal justice system and a prison complex. You have to think about these things. We have to think about these things. You have to instruct your kids to think about these things. Otherwise, they will become, let's say, food for that system. Throw them in there. It keeps police working. It keeps lawyers employed. It keeps judges employed. It keeps a prison industrial complex that is privatized now for the most part, very rich and wealthy on housing inmates, housing criminals, and who wants to get caught up in it? Nobody, not me, for sure. And people never think it could be them, but they don't see how some of the things that are offered to them and say, hey, do what you want, do as thou wilt, how those things set you up for this type of entrapment. Okay. Telling you, like I said, in my queen country that I imagine, where I'm the queen and, I have, let's say, more control over what comes in and out. There's no drugs in this place. Yeah. Life is good without drugs. Sober living is a way of life. Yeah. In my paradise. Okay. My country that I imagine. There's no alcohol there. We have all seen that the benefits of alcohol far are way under the harm. And with that being said, because of its relation to how it, and it places so much danger, the partying that people have with alcohol, or they seem to, say that they enjoy, the crime, the criminal things, the impact on society is so much worse than the enjoyment. If we looked at the statistics, if we actually analyzed this and said, why is this even legal? Okay. So personally, I want to bring this back around to the system that we currently live in, though, where these things are offered up to you and say, hey, use them responsibly. Even though when a person is inebriated, I mean, how can they be responsible when they're not in their right mind? You see how that's a trap. You're not in your right mind. Your faculties are impaired. And they're telling you that you're going to be fully responsible when you sober up for what you did when you were not in your right mind. And I'm bringing this up because not just for this case, but for all cases like it, which is you have to think before you drink. Okay. And I know that some people feel like, well, because they have the wherewithal and, to say, hey, I'm going to leave in an Uber because I know that if I don't have my car keys, I won't be tempted to make a bad decision. And I think you are 100% right. But what about the other ones that, just don't have that forethought? And I guess that's just where they end up, is what's going to probably happen to this guy, Mr. Henderson, which is that you're going to go to prison. Okay, but I digress. Let me get back on track here. If you're wondering if Drake, the artist, had something to say after he learned of what happened to two of his fans that were killed after attending the St. Louis concert at Enterprise Center, yes, he did chime in on it at another concert that followed. And listen closely, you can hear what he had to say about it.
Pay attention, I promise I would pay my respects in this situation every night, so I'm not trying to bore you. We're going to turn up tonight, don't worry, but I got one thing I want to say, and I promise myself I say it every show. We did a show on this tour. We did a show on this tour that was in St. Louis, Missouri. It was a great night, it was a great show, and there was a mother and her young daughter that came to the show. And I'm sure that they had a great time at that show. But unfortunately, afterwards, as they were leaving the building, they lost their life to a reckless driver who ran into them as they were crossing the street. And I bring that up not to bring the mood down. I just bring that up to let you know that while we're all here, 17,000 deep in Frost Manor, I want you to be present in the moment. And I want you to be grateful for your motherfucking life, because you never know what's
Monte, what do you have to say to the family? What's your reaction to seeing that video posted online yesterday? Mr. Henderson, do you have any comment? Do you have anything to say for Laticha or Alyssa's family? Reaction to your mom? Anything at all, sir?
Before I move on from talking about the defendant in this case, I just want to talk about or highlight the fatal mistakes here. Obviously, drinking and driving. Those two things together was the mistake. That's the prison sentence that will more than likely precede those actions. And if you don't get anything else from this, it's just make better decisions before you start drinking. But I also wanted to reflect on this, a 22-year-old, a life, two lives we can never bring back, but also one that through his decisions is probably going to be forever changed, more than likely. Only 2020, what is that, 4 years ago? This is what was going on in Monte Henderson's life. Just to add some perspective, take a look.
Monte Michael Henderson. India Azrina Henry.
Look, I don't know about you, but when I think about where my life was 4 years after graduating from high school, number one, I've never taken up drinking, so I can't fully relate, but I know that that is a very, very common, let's say, pastime of people in that age range. Okay. And that is not an excuse. That does not waive accountability at all. But it does provide some perspective when you look at these articles or you hear these stories and they're calling him a killer. They're calling him a murderer. They're saying all these things as if they have not been 22, as if they have not made a mistake before. That's the part that I just want to highlight is perspective. Perspective of one human to another human. It gets lost sometimes in the shuffle, in the media for sure. All you see is him saying, you know, do you want to comment? Do you want to say something to the family? I don't know why reporters are still doing that other than for media controversy and to perhaps promote stereotypes or, you know, to basically vilify. And trust me, some of it is definitely, let's say, warranted. But I think that it's just less than helpful. It's not necessary to do that because this is somebody's child too. This is a human being too. So I just wanted to, you know, kind of highlight that because it seems to be lost. And I know I wasn't thinking about it when I was reading the articles about what happened. I only was just like, that's ridiculous. I was like the people in the comments when they were like, why were you driving that fast? That is so ridiculous. And again, one of the fatal mistakes that I highlighted was the speeding, you know. But I want to say this to put perspective on a life, you know, any of our lives, which is that how many of us speed every day? How many of us have, you know, been caught speeding several times? And it doesn't end like this. And yes, it's a perfect storm type of situation where you have the drinking, you have the speeding, you have the youth, you have pedestrians in a crosswalk. You have all of these things that came together in a very unfortunate, you know, terrible, fatal storm of events. But I also wanted to bring this out, and this is what I alluded to early on in the video, which was, well, before I move on to that, I just want to read this thing about him. And he graduated from Pattonville High School. Congratulations to 3 student athletes from the Pattonville High School boys basketball team who earned special recognition for the 2019-2020 season. Blank, that was a kid, was named to the first team all district and all conference list. Another student was named to the honorable mention all conference team, and Monte Henderson earned the sportsmanship award. The boys team is coached by blah with the assistance of blah and blah. Okay. But in doing my little public, you know, research, it just changed, you know, the perspective a bit for me when I go from seeing high school Monte Henderson to the adult mugshot of Monte Henderson. And I think about that if anybody can get anything else, just make good decisions. Help someone young around you to make better and good decisions. So I also want to, because this is, I think, going to factor in if it's allowed in court. But there were excessive speeding. These are considered traffic charges, not criminal charges, but it is worthy of looking at because I could find it in public records, which is that it looks like December 21st of 2023 that, and this is only months before this accident, Monte Henderson was got a ticket for exceeding the speed limit by 20 to 25 miles over the speed limit. Okay? That's worthy of mention. He also received another speeding ticket prior to that one, September 11th of 2020. Again, 20 to 25 miles over the speed limit. And then finally, and this is what was mentioned in, I believe it was an article that I read where the prosecuting attorney or district attorney, whatever it was, they were talking about that he has a history. This is the history they were speaking about, which is there was another one on September 4th of 2020. So that's 2 in 2020 in the same month of going 20 to 25 miles over the speed limit. So he didn't take those life warnings, seriously. And it's just one of those things where, like I said, we've all done this, but maybe we haven't done this in combination with, drinking, or maybe we didn't do it in combination with, not being careful of crosswalks. So I just hope that this serves a greater purpose in discussing this case. I hope that more people make better decisions and that more families don't have to suffer such terrible losses.
Monte, what do you have to say to the family about this? What's your reaction to seeing that video posted online yesterday? Mr. Henderson, do you have any comment? Do you have anything to say to Laticha or Alyssa's family? Reaction to your mom? Anything at all, sir?
For justice. This mother and daughter from Chicago were killed after leaving a concert in downtown St. Louis earlier this month. The man accused of running them over is on house arrest tonight after a court appearance this morning. Our Justina Cornell was there as a judge put new restrictions on the suspect's release. She joins us live from North 18th and Olive Streets. That's where the deadly crash happened. Justina.
And there are surveillance cameras above this intersection which captured the entire crash. Now, this video will not only be used in court as evidence, but it's also circulating on social media right now after that video was leaked. This is just moments after Monte Henderson left the courthouse Tuesday morning. He's been out on bond after being charged with manslaughter, accused of killing 2 women from Chicago in town for the Drake concert. This week, video of the incident surfaced on social media. 5 on Your Side has decided not to show the moment of impact, but the video leading up to the crash shows the car speed toward the women in the intersection. Prosecutors say Henderson was going at least 70 miles per hour when he raced through a red light. Family members of the victim, Laticha Bracero, and her daughter, Alyssa Cordova, say the video is difficult to watch. In court Tuesday, prosecutors read a statement on behalf of those family members, and they asked for justice and said Henderson used his vehicle that night as a weapon.
The other thing that I would like to do in this video is to humanize the victims. And again, not a lot of time was spent on the victims, not because they're not important, but because there isn't a whole lot to be learned here when you were the innocent party. They were the innocent party in this scenario. They did nothing wrong. They were in the crosswalk. The crosswalk it was their turn to walk. They were more than halfway across the street when this collision happened. And you can see that other cars were struck. So there are more than just these 2. These were the most critical, obviously the fatal victims of this scenario. But there are other people that were hit. There was a 2017 Mitsubishi, I believe, that was hit, and I believe there were several victims that were taken to the hospital. There was a 2015, I forget what type of car it was, but it was a 2015 something. CX-5 or something like that, that I think that he hit finally, and that was out of view of the camera. So there were other people, other vehicles involved in this collision, other people that went to the hospital, but thankfully they walked away with their lives, unlike Laticha and Alyssa, excuse me. So I just wanted to read the remarks, I guess this is like the obituary or a summary of it from the funeral home. It was online, so I thought that I would read it just for us to kind of get to know and humanize these human beings that lost their lives, that was just snatched away from them in an instant. So it is with broken hearts that we announce the passing of Laticha Bracero and Alyssa Angel Cordova, mother and daughter, who passed on February the 14th of 2024. Laticha was born on January 14th, 1982 in Chicago, Illinois. She graduated from Dr. Pedro Albizu Campos and worked for Wintrust Bank. Laticha enjoyed traveling, dancing, and shopping. She always supported small businesses. Some of her hobbies included collecting shoes and watching 90 Day Fiancé with her daughter, Alyssa. Sundays were known for fondue rituals with Laticha and Alyssa. Those names rhyming is tripping me up, but let me continue. Alyssa Angel was born on June 12th of 2002 in Chicago, Illinois. Alyssa graduated from Roberto Clemente High School and was a college student. Alyssa, too, shared some of the same passions as her mother, including traveling, collecting shoes, shopping, and watching 90 Day Fiancé. She also had a great love for dogs, playing video games, listening to music, and being with friends. Alyssa loved manifesting her dreams, learning more about astrology, doing makeup, and being a fashion icon. Alyssa and her mother, Laticha, were inseparable and shared a strong bond. The dynamic duo will be remembered for their amazing smiles, infectious giggles, and the love they shared for one another. They will both be deeply missed by all of their family and friends. Okay, so I decided to write and reflect on this a little bit. So let me read some of what came to mind as I was thinking about this case as an overall, let's say tragic situation for everybody involved. And there are many victims in this case, because the victims range from, first and foremost is Laticha and Alyssa. I would say that they are the biggest victims here. And then after that would be probably the families of those two young ladies that lost their lives. Their friends, their co-workers, everybody that loved them, liked them, cared about them, their neighbors. This is a tragedy for a lot of people. And then I think after that, it's also a tragic story, a very, let's say, I don't even know how to put it, but just a tragic story. At least let's say the silver lining for Monte Henderson is that more than likely he won't be in jail his whole life, and that he have time, God willing, to have more life after prison, potentially. I don't see it being rational or reasonable for him to be in jail for the rest of his life for this. Not in my opinion, and not in looking at other crimes that happen in our Crimisphere. But I don't see this being a life sentence for him. So I hope that he learns from this and that better things come for him. That's the only thing I could do is wish him better after this, and wish peace for the victims and their families, and also those people who are unnamed and unmentioned, who were their cars were collided into also. Hopefully they're doing okay and on the mend. So let me go ahead and read what I wrote. This was a perfect storm of poor decisions that will likely land this young man, Monte Henderson, in prison with the societal badge of shame called a felon. I believe we can agree that punishment is unavoidable here. The defendant earned whatever comes to him because of his actions. However, let's consider a few things like them arguing against bail for a first-time criminal defendant. In America, you're innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. It's called due process. All of the things that have been charged against him are alleged at this point. Bail does not amount to freedom. We should keep that in mind. There are usually restrictions, and even if it takes months or years, the defendant will get his or her day in court. And one of those days may mean that they go to prison. I don't expect the victims' families to think rationally about this because emotions are high, and in the worst possible way, they have been faced with the reality of life being not fair and quite ugly and painful. But for fellow Earth neighbors, I hoped that we would agree that our society here in America is built upon a system of laws, even if imperfect. It's still the system we have. I would rather we reflect more on how we got here and what we should do to avoid being here again and again and again. If you even hint at restrictions on alcohol or drugs, people absolutely lose their minds. I'm sure statistics would support me on this being one of the biggest influences or cofactors in criminal behavior. I am not making excuses for the defendant, but instead looking to spark more thought and conversation about how we are going to coexist in this fear we share. I think of the victims' families that had to enter an apartment or a house where people once lived. I imagine a bed full of clothes or two beds full of clothes that didn't make the cut while deciding on what to wear to go see Drake. The bathroom full of makeup and hair products or curling irons strewn about the vanity. Perhaps even the smell of perfume still lingering in the air. It can't be easy to live with such a tragic loss. Family members entering their home after this event has to feel like those two lives were suddenly frozen in time and then they vanished. And the haunting question, did they suffer? I saw the GoFundMe the family set up to raise money to bring their bodies home. Suddenly the family has so many decisions to make and tasks to complete while carrying the burden of grief and unquenchable desire for justice. But what does justice look like? Extremists would say the death penalty, while a more reasonable mind would ponder a number that seems appropriate for a 22-year-old that made the biggest mistake of his life. Only 4 years previous, he was a basketball player at Pattonville High School. Guys, he just graduated in 2020. I'm much older, so it's hard to imagine my life taking such a twisted turn at that age. I think of his classmates and teachers that saw his face on the news and the surprise and sadness it must evoke in learning how his life's path turned out. I think about the dumbest thing I ever did and how lucky I am that it did not result in anyone's death or me landing in prison. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I escaped. And I said escaped because it's not like we can't relate. Have you ever run a red light intentionally or unintentionally? Have you ever driven over the speed limit or did anything reckless in your youth or even now? All of these reflections made clear to me that these things are tough and simple answers may feel good when they don't involve you or someone you love, but these are things we need to think about more often before we wake up to the worst day of our lives. Talk to your children, your nieces, your nephews, and help them drill in a plan. Plan to party. Plan how you're getting back home before you buy drinks, before you consume alcohol. That's why I would like to leave a thought with you, my Earth neighbors. What's the appropriate punishment here? I even question how media headlines and word choices feed the frenzy and help to spread hate and stereotypes and help to separate you from your humanity, and how we should see ourselves in everybody around us to some extent. And of course, with limitations. The insane part is how many do not notice the classism also. If you have money and wealth, you walk away from these types of crimes without a felony. How, with a good lawyer and enough money, restitution can ease the pain of a foul play like this. If you can pay the tears away in a civil suit or settlement, you can buy back your freedom and reputation. I think the reason I did not say much about the victim's perspective is that I do not think you can rationalize such a loss. I also do not think that prison time or even death to a defendant will satisfy the pain of such tragic and shocking loss. How can I? A person that did not experience this viral, for all the wrong reasons, moment in time, how can I truly understand what they're going through? The family is probably tortured by the video that the St. Louis Police Department leaked to the public of their family members being dragged from the camera view like stunt doubles in a horror film. I personally think these are tests in life that challenge us to the core and force us to make sense of our existence, and the things that happen to us and the things that matter to us are brought into focus and made more clear. We're all left to reflect on how the next moment or visit with loved ones is not guaranteed. Any of us can be gone in an instant. Before I descend into another thought vacuum about the mental torture of human understanding of death and knowing each of us will taste death at some point, let me move on and say this. This is as good as it gets to allow each defendant due process in an imperfect society. This is a case I set an alert on because I want to know how it turns out. I want to know, how many years will Monte Henderson get? Will he plead to a certain number of years or a certain charge? How will things pan out for him? I feel like I do not need a crystal ball to predict that whatever happens, the family of the victims will likely not find an adequate sense of justice. I mean, how can they? I think the best they can do is what I heard the cousin, Nicole, say to the media outlets. She found comfort in this twisted fate and knowing they're still together, because it would have been earth-shattering to one or the other if only one survived without the other. Okay, welcome to the Comments Café, where I like to take a look at what others are saying before I even start the story. Like when I'm reading articles, these are like the comments I find under them, some of the posts and articles, and it just kind of gives me like a little bit of a pulse on what our Earth neighbors are thinking when these stories pop up. So I'll read a few of those, more than a few, and comment on a couple of them because some of them are worthy of my response. Let's get at it. They got to do something about that. The last girl that was a volleyball player came for a tournament and left with no legs. Like, I'm glad she survived though. Rest in peace, ladies. Scott Rosenblum, laugh out loud. When you're guilty as fuck, hire this scumbag. Oh my God, they didn't even see that coming. They're strolling and happy. Shake my fucking head. Just like that, on a good day, your life could be gone in a blink. This is the reason why you should always look both ways, even if you have the right of way. How do you know they didn't do that? They are almost to the other side when they got hit. This monster came out of nowhere because even the car turning clearly thought he was good to turn as well. Please stop driving like you don't love your life. This is sad. Shake my head. You know, I'm sick and dog damn tired of these punk ass fools driving crazy in these streets, not giving a damn about poor innocent pedestrians and drivers, let alone themselves. These women weren't even from here, and they fall victim to the hands of ignorance after just visiting to have a good time at a concert? Shake my fucking head. Makes me sick. Everyone in this town drives like an asshole. I hate it here. Man, I hope it wasn't the girl talking to me at the concert. She said she drove up here from the Chi. So is there some money here? How can they afford Rosenblum? I guess his goal is to drum up more criminal business by getting this murderer a reduced sentence. Does it get any lower than a lawyer? I guess Trump's lawyers. Traveling recklessly at a high rate of speed, running a red light, especially when pedestrians are present, is not an accident. The level of irresponsibility and disregard for others should be treated as wanton disregard for human life. Yes, you have to give that 30-second wait before you proceed with the light. It's ridiculous. I just think certain groups of people have no impulse control in their frontal lobe, are totally incapable of understanding cause and effect, and have no empathy for other beings. I used to individually administer IQ tests in school setting, and you begin to see a pattern. Everyone should see the video. Fuck impartiality. Henderson should have been tried, convicted, and executed on the spot. Good old St. Louis Police Department. It's good to see some departments still have their priorities in the right place. Sarcasm. A great night turned into devastating tragedy because of one fucking idiot. Shake my head. Shit is so sad. How is this involuntary manslaughter not murder too? This is terrifying. This is absolutely insane. Why was he going that fast? They really didn't even have a chance. Like, you have to really be aware of your surroundings at all times. Wow. But even if they looked, he was coming so ridiculously fast, they likely wouldn't have been able to respond in time. Shake my head. Sad. Okay, so the obvious one that I see oftentimes under news articles, especially the local ones, is people getting political in the comments. So in saying that, there was people coming for the judge. She's an African-American judge, and they took issue with the bond. Originally, when it had no restrictions, they took issue even when it did have restrictions. So basically, there are some people that turn every case that happens, every news story, into a reason for them to say, see, my political, affiliations are more correct. So that's stupid, whatever. I don't care anything about that. But it's just something that I've noticed. Have you guys comment below, tell me. So the other ones that I do agree with, which is the people, we all try to come up with these things, these plans in our head about how to avoid death, how to avoid some kind of tragic situation like this, injury or death. And I get it. People saying hesitate, like, don't think that just because you have the right of way, like as a pedestrian, that you got bumpers on your knees, right? I agree with that. I've seen plenty of people, particularly on parking lots, where people will just walk out because they know legally they have right of way. But I think that it's less than smart, I'll say it that way, to not considering the fact that somebody could be turning the knob on their radio. They could be distracted with a kid in the back crying or asking, give me, do this, mom. Or a person that has bad vision, or a person that is under the influence of drugs or alcohol. There's just a lot of reasons for you to be smart as a pedestrian. That's first of all. And that doesn't apply to this case, so I'm not implying that this had anything to do with this, but I get why people comment these things in such a situation as this. But also, it is kind of like, as Earth neighbors, you do have to kind of see patterns here. And also just remember what type of society we live in. You don't know who's behind the wheel. You don't know what is going to happen. So it is good to make contact, to make eye contact. That's what I generally do, is try to make eye contact with the driver so that I'm like, we acknowledge we see each other, and I'm going to walk in front of your car and you are going to allow me to do that. Like, there's a non-verbal that happens if you pause to make sure that that happens. But I have seen that there are a lot of people in our society that thinks that, oh, I have the legal right of way. And I'm like, yeah, you could also be a person who ends up with no legs or worse. So I agree with that commenter who made, who said something to that effect, but also about the driving crazy in that region, which is that I am familiar with that area. I don't know how he was driving that fast. There are so many manholes in downtown St. Louis. And then again, after a concert lets out, you do assume that there's a lot of people potentially walking around in that area. So it was reckless for sure. I don't think that's questionable. That's why I really feel like this is a case that's a matter of how much time. I even thought to myself that if I were a judge, I would love to ask the defendant, what do you think should happen to you? Because I would like to get like a level of what do they think is fair, like to how to punish them. Just I think for my own, like, where's their head and their hearts? I would love to hear from them and see what they say. You know what I mean? It probably would impact me if I had the authority to sentence them, just to know, like, where's their empathy, where is their thinking now. And then the other thing that I wanted to comment on was yeah, it is shocking because I've attended so many concerts myself, and to think that, and when I saw the video, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but that one person is like swinging that bag in such a way that I felt the happiness, I felt the joy. I felt like they were in the middle of talking about their favorite, song that he performed or their favorite moment in that concert. Like, you could tell they was caught up in each other in that moment. Like, they were probably talking, and probably it was just a pep to her step that made me feel like she was just so happy. I don't know which one that was in relation to that video, but that one that was holding that bag and swinging it, it was just something about it. I was just like, it's just shocking to the mind and the heart and the soul to see that, in a second, she never saw it coming and she's just gone, So I get that part. The other part was when people chime in and I hear, these are the people that creep me out, to know that they're in our same environment. Like, we share earth with them, which is the people who say stuff like they should have tried, convicted, and executed him on the spot. How does that happen without an investigation? How do you do that on the spot? So, and I know, like, comments could be like a 12-year-old or it could be a 70-year-old, who knows? But I always feel like these are the descendants of the KKK, vigilantes, mobs, anarchists, just people that I honestly am just like, we probably work with them, but because it's just so stupid. I'm just going to say it straight up. I think it is so stupid to say something like that, because you're no different than any person that we call a killer or a murderer. You know what I mean? Because you don't really care about, is it true? Is there something that we should know? Should we investigate? They don't care about due process, people who think like this. And that is just as dark and demented to me as the people that commit crimes on purpose. You know what I'm saying? So I find that to be like weird when I see comments like that. But let me address something else that goes back to something that I said that I wanted to talk about, which is that commenter that said good old St. Louis Police Department, with sarcasm, where they say it's good to see that some departments still have their priorities in the right place. Well, let's talk about that. They leaked the surveillance video. These were from traffic cameras. These weren't just, somebody happened to be filming in that area. These were traffic camera video. So there's somebody inside of the St. Louis Police Department that don't believe in due process, that wants to taint the jury selection, that wants to not have this defendant have his fair day in court, his fair pursuit of due process. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that for anybody. I particularly know that Missouri is a very racially charged state that is still very backwards, very racist, and has a lot of problems. With that being said, I think that this is a miscarriage of justice for the police to leak such an inflammatory video. Number one, it shows no consideration to the victims, the families. Even though I personally don't like the censorship we live under, this paternal type of censorship where they's like, oh, this is too dark for me to air it on the news. It's the news. Let the news come with a disclaimer that says that it's for adults only. There could be anything on there. Don't filter my news. Tell me the truth. I don't need you to be my parent. I'm an adult. I'm educated. I can handle, if I don't want to watch it, I'll turn off the TV or I won't watch it. But I don't like that censorship that we live under. Okay, soapbox, get off of it. So back to this case. I think that that is completely unethical, and I hope they get to the bottom of that leak, like Scott Rosenblum, which is the lawyer. This is Monte Henderson's lawyer. Scott Rosenblum is, again, one of those really notoriety, what do you call it? Familiar, let's say high esteem lawyers in the area, from my understanding. So when that person comments like, is there money here? It's just it's the microaggressions for me. Like when you think about this, like I don't know this Monte Henderson from anybody else, from Adam, right? But I just think it just seems so almost racist. Is it just me? That just seems so like weird for somebody to be like, is there money here? Like how can he afford Scott Rosenblum? And I'm just like, huh? I don't know Anyway, that's what the comments do. Even though I enjoy the comments because it's crazy down there. It's crazy. But I enjoy the comments because sometimes it's funny. Sometimes it's thoughtful. Sometimes it's just insane and anarchy. But anyway, that's all that I have about these particular comments. I hope that you guys will take some time to visit the Comments Cafe beneath the video and leave your thoughts, whether or not that's responded to a comment that I highlighted, or if it's just commenting on or disagreeing with something I've said in the video. So of course I don't aim to offend or to, let's say trigger people, but it's just I guess I'm just allowing you guys to kind of listen to my perspective and on this particular case and our system in general. So thank you for visiting the channel. I hope you come back soon and that you will subscribe, like the video. That's the best way to show support. If you enjoy this kind of content, it'll let me know to keep making it. And also, you'll get notification if you hit the bell icon also on when I upload the next video. Thanks for coming by and see you in the next one. Bye.